Hi folks, this video is about one of the most pivotal scenes in the novel, Alyosha's great transformation. So after the death of Father Zosima, Alyosha has this breakdown. He's completely devastated. And when we see things like a great pain was in his heart, talk of the heart for Dostoevsky is almost always code for talk of the soul and the spirit and these characters' existential crisis and existential situation. And the narrator just pushes the point home for us. A great change was clearly taking place in this character. Now, how could that be? Because it seems like Alyosha was the most with it character in the whole novel. In fact, he seems like the only with it character in the whole novel. All the other brothers, all the other people in the whole novel are seemingly constantly fighting at each other's throats and in deep angst all of the time. He's the one who seemingly has all of the answers. But I think what Dostoevsky is telling us is something quite subtle here, which is the kind of simple-minded faith that Alyosha has actually doesn't have all the answers. And the life in the monastery, which tends toward an ascetic lifestyle, is not necessarily the way in which we're going to find salvation. So Father Pacey, one of the other sort of good guy monks, one of Zosima's buddies in the monastery, remarks on this and says, how have you too fallen into temptation when all of the hubbub is arising about the stink of Zosima's corpse? So what makes this such a crisis for Alyosha? I think there's many ways of making sense of it. And this is a really subtle part of the novel to get this character motivation right and to really understand what's going on with him spiritually or existentially. So I highly recommend reading these pages carefully. I mean, they're so dense and so rich. And the narrator actually toys with several possibilities to give us a sense of the complexity of what's going on. On one level, I think it makes a lot of sense. His mentor, his guiding light, the person he is spiritually devoted to in the world has just died. And this has rocked his sense of a center in his life and a guidance in his life. So just the loss of Zosima alone could be difficult. But then, of course, it's more like he's devastated because of the stink. The corpse, the decomposition of the corpse. But I think so on some level that bothers him. And then on the even further level, the third thing that the narrator, pounds home about is it's the injustice of the thing. The fact that the public has turned on Zosima and this one who Alyosha takes to be the most righteous of all is now being completely denigrated and defiled by those far less, spiritually upstanding. So let me just give you a few of the passages to see how subtle and how amusing the narrator's voice is, because this is one of the places where we really see the narrator putting forth opinions and then questioning his own opinions. And so it's clearly not just this omniscient narrator, or it's not Dostoevsky himself who is saying all this. Their narrator talks actually about being part of the town and part of the monastic communities in this fictional world. And so I think it's important to bear that in mind as you read what they're saying about these passages. Like, the narrator says, if I were asked directly, could all this anguish and such great perturbation have arisen in him only because instead of being able or at once producing healings, the body of the elder Zosima, on the contrary, showed signs of early corruption. That's the body decomposing and stinking. He would say, without hesitation, indeed, it is so. So the fact that miracles didn't come, but in fact something completely bestial, or in some ways completely natural. Here we see this tension between the miraculous supernatural miracles and just the most basic natural facts of life, that all bodies decompose and return to the earth. What better sign of our earthly existence than the decomposing body of Zosima? And what way to shock someone whose thoughts are to the supernatural by this act which emphasizes most poignantly the natural and bodily nature of humans. And so it seems like Alyosha had a kind of simple-minded faith that expected the supernatural miracles, and that's what's precisely being indicted. But the narrator keeps going, and it's not so simple. So then the narrator really takes it back and says, wait a minute, it was not actually a matter of miracles. It was not the expectation of the miracles, which frivolous in its impatience. Alyosha had no need of miracles then for the triumph of his convictions. So this is really raising the question, what is the relationship between miracles and faith? do miracles come first and then that leads to faith? That's the position, that the sort of religiosity that I think that I've consistently said is what Dostoevsky wants to question throughout the novel. And here he's really showing you that this is one of the fundamental themes. And precisely, and the narrator is trying to save Alyosha by saying he didn't have that problem. But again, he keeps vacillating. And, so he says, and what matter if in the course of events, this justice, that Alyosha had been looking for Zosima, had assumed in his expectations the form of those miracles that he expected immediately. See, now we're going back to the pendulum has swung back. He did actually expect those miracles because it was justice he thirsted for, not simply miracles. Of course, I put the emphasis on the word simply there because it was miracles. It wasn't just simply miracles. I think what the narrator is doing is something quite subtle, but we can actually understand it. In a sense, it's not a complete inculpation of Alyosha's character. It's not like Alyosha had this kind of is the fool, had a completely simple-minded kind of faith, and then that just gets quashed. Because once for his transformation in the second half of the novel, that wouldn't make sense. He has to fundamentally be of a sound character. And it was just this aspect of it that wasn't yet completely matured yet. He hadn't gotten rid of his need for these miracles. And so he's got within him fundamentally the right sort of countenance. The concern with the justice of the thing, the spiritual righteousness, rather than the opinions of the public who are, criticizing Zosima, is central to Alyosha's motivations and character. And it's just that he also has this other aspect that he needs to outgrow. And so there's a way in which, yes, it is sort of simple-minded faith, but it's simple-minded faith from something that is quite praiseworthy, a kind of passionate involvement with the world that cares so ardently with the way things are for the concerns of justice. So read those passages carefully. I think if you think of them in this light, you'll be able to make sense of all of these complex things he's saying about Alyosha. And really it is, so we understand the character's depths is why the narrator keeps going on like this. But there is no doubt, Alyosha does have a crisis here. And what comes of it? This is his great moment of temptation. That's what is so important for the novel. Of course, what happens with him? He then goes into the pine grove and he's out in the dark wood. Now, what this makes me think of immediately, this is almost like a direct reference to Dante, who begins his trilogy with this line, in the middle of life's journey, I found myself in a dark wood. What more existential moment could you have than standing at a dark crossroads and running into a devil? So Rakitin comes along, who is exactly one of these devil figures. So, of course, Alyosha would be lost in the dark woods and run into a devil figure if he's going to have to go through this major test of a temptation to see what's going to happen. We're going to learn his true character that the narrator has been still dropping hints about or not letting us lose sight of in the face of his simple-minded expectation of miracles. And that true character is going to emerge from how he deals with this moment of temptation and confrontation with one of the many devils of the story, Rakitin. Now, so this is just, I think the storytelling is amazing here. How metaphorical and symbolic almost everything that happens in this novel is. So Alyosha is completely dejected. This is the right moment for Rakitin, who's quite a little manipulator. His name comes up in several places in these readings. He's somebody who's fairly selfish. He's fairly aloof and proud of himself. He thinks of himself as a smart atheist. And it's that kind of arrogance that atheism can so easily take that Dostoevsky really likes to poke fun at and inculpate. Ivan is such another perfect example of this. What Rakitin does, he notices immediately that Alyosha has really been shaken. He's got a completely different countenance now. Alyosha, he's the perfect pawn for Rakitin's manipulation, it seems. He's like, let's go to Grushenka's, that den of iniquity. And Alyosha's like, okay, fine, I'll do anything. And Rakitin says okay, let's go drink some vodka. And Alyosha says, fine, let's do it. So Rakitin even puts this in Yvonne's terms. I mean, we are clearly supposed to be thinking of those speeches, rebellion, and with uh, Yvonne and Alyosha. Rakitin says, "Ah, the devil! You've gotten angry with your God now. You've rebelled." You know, it was Yvonne, of course, who was the one who had rebelled, and that's what made Yvonne a sort of devil figure. So this is the moment of truth for Alyosha. Is he going to rebel, join the ranks of Rakitin and Yvonne, or what is he going to do? It seems like, you know, he's on the razor's edge. He even quotes Yvonne to Rakitin. "I do not rebel against my God. I simply did not accept the world." That's one of Yvonne's quotes in his metaphor about returning the ticket. So you can't let me say, those earlier events that are so often taken in isolation, Yvonne's speeches about rebellion and the Grand Inquisitor, are deeply intertwined with what happens to the characters afterward. And I will try to convince you in some later videos, really can't be understood at all until we see the actions and the fates of these characters. So what happens? They go to Grushenka's house next. And of course, she's completely surprised because she actually, and this sort of subtly comes out in the dialogue, she had been trying to get Rakitin to bring Alyosha there all along so she could, you know, be her wicked person. She wanted to corrupt this boy who was, you know, seemingly of pure virtue. And that in a sense is what Alyosha was like. He was the pure little virtuous child who went to the monastery early instead of going to the university, and acted in a very meek and prudish way throughout his life. So she flirts with him. She sits on his lap, all the while, you know, noting the fact that she is a wicked, base person. And I think we really see something important about her existential situation here. You know, at the beginning of the book, I dwelled on the Karamazov family because they start the book, and we don't actually learn the depths of Grushenka's character until we get through a lot of this deeper action in the story. But nonetheless, it's her existential character is absolutely essential to understand in order to see how the fate of Dmitri works out and what Dostoevsky wants to say about it. So notice what she does. She admits her base side. She's a low woman. She berates herself constantly. She does things and she admits, you know, "I'm a violent woman," she says. But at the same time, notice this, she feels shame. See, this is the way in which she is not like Fyodor whatsoever. Who does this make you think of? Hopefully you already can put the pieces together. Her existential countenance, in my opinion, is just like Dimitri's. She is one who simply does not have a reconciliation. She feels the pull of both sides. She is happily passionate and wicked. She's so unlike Katya in that sense. But at the same time, she has that sense of nobility and honor and ethics. She has the feelings of shame. She has a conscience, and she even tells Alyosha, "I think I sort of sometimes think of you. I externalize this aspect of myself and think of you as my conscience," which in some ways you can see why, you know, she wanted to devour Alyosha, Rakitin says at one point. And that is, in a sense, her existentially attempting to repress and destroy the part of herself that haunts her, precisely the part of Dimitri's self that haunts him, his sense of honor. And notice also something subtle going on here. You know, she's talking openly about Dmitri with this. It doesn't create jealousy, you know, that she loves Alyosha in some sense, she says even. But Dimitri's not bothered by this because he does understand her. He understands her because this is precisely his existential and spiritual situation too. So that ability for mutual understanding, that in a sense helps us get why they are the ones who are destined to end up together if they are going to find some sort of reconciliation. If you get this, then you can see why the novel would make no sense if Dmitri ended up with Katya. That would just be a horrible novel. It's incomprehensible. So they have to, if he has to end up with Grushenka, if he's going to end up in any way whatsoever, it's that or suicide. And in fact, we don't really see this too explicitly in the movie. So this is parts of the book novel that you didn't read. But the way when he goes back and gets his pistols from the pawn shop owner and then hops on the horses and rides out to the small village where Grushenka has gone to meet up with the Polish officer, there's many passages, introspective, Hamlet-like passages that talk about suicide there. So he's on the razor's edge of existential despair. He is either going to be saved or he is going to destroy himself. And in many ways, Grushenka is that rides this same passionate life, and in that way, she and Dmitri really are the ones who are destined to be together. Now, so what happens with this? So we get a sense of her existential situation, and she and Alyosha have this interesting moment where we don't know where it's going to go. She seems like she's going to be the temptress and destroy him, and it's going to be, this could easily happen. This is a reality. And Rakitin, of course, is loving it. He's watching carnivorously from where he sat. I mean, such an amazing sentence to describe exactly what his character is like. But remember, this is the point. I put this quote up on some of the other videos. Remember, Alyosha is a person who does have a sound center. He is a person who can deal with the temptation and come out on the other side. And we understand it really as this grief. And I think there's a lot of deep, existential truth to this. This is his strongest armor precisely when he needs it. And what happens is, instead of Rakitin getting his wish and seeing the downfall of the righteous one, instead Grushenka actually treats Alyosha with a very important, profound sense of kindness. This occurs when she learns that Zosima has died, and she hops off Alyosha's lap at once and really feels bad because she's fundamentally on the right side too. She's got this sense of nobility. If she were just like Fyodor, another version of Fyodor's existential situation, she would do no such thing. And of course, Alyosha recognizes this act of kindness from her immediately, and he sees the good spirit in her. He sees her good soul. He calls her a true sister. He expresses a kind of love for her too. And he says, "You've restored my soul right now in this magnanimous act." And they have this moment where they come together in a very sort of profound spiritual bonding. So this is what we don't see in the movie whatsoever. In the movie, remember, Dmitri and Grushenka finally get together at the tavern in this big night of debauchery where she's trying to meet with a Polish officer, but then rebuffs him. And then she and Dmitri fall into each other's arms. And it's sort of a cheesy, like, true love story or something. I'm not even sure how the movie is intending us to read it. The novel, we can understand it now, because what actually happens is this moment with Alyosha is what saves her. This, in a sense, is the key moment that helps her. And this sets up the relationship with Dmitri later on. That moment with Dmitri, that type of human interaction and salvation is not even possible if they are not first having this moment. And we'll see why this transformation matters so much. Now, Rakitin, amusingly, Dostoevsky often puts the best insights into the characters that fundamentally he doesn't want us to sympathize with. But you see how much sympathy he has with even the wicked villains in his story. Rakitin and Ivan often get the best lines. And Rakitin says, "Oh, really, she saved you, did she?" He's being totally sarcastic here. "She was going to eat you up, don't you know that?" And he's so mad. He's been completely foiled. He thought he was going to get to see the downfall of Alyosha. Instead, what happened is Alyosha and Grushenka now are saved. And notice, she always admits her wickedness. This is quite key. This is why she is so much like Dmitri. And remember how important memories are. She says, "I will never forget it." This is Dostoevskian code for something deeply spiritual now that a person will take with them. So Rakitin is crestfallen now that they've had this spiritual moment together. And amusingly, his talk of salvation is exactly right. This is the existential salvation. Having a bonding moment with another person, this mutual acknowledgement of how we are deeply flawed as humans, and yet we are acceptable nonetheless and redeemable nonetheless. That is what salvation is. And Rakitin even says it. He says, "Oh, so fine, you saved each other. You saved her. And he's just saying it sarcastically, but that is, in a sense, existentially speaking, what just happened between the two of them. And remember, we've been on track. We've been looking for miracles. Well, amusingly, Rakitin says it. This is the miracle. You somehow converted the sinful woman. And in a sense, this is what Dostoevsky thinks this is what a miracle is in Dostoevsky's worldview. Two humans, the humans have bonded first, remember? It's so essential to understand that Dostoevsky has been asking us, what comes first? The faith, the right relationship, or the miracles? And do the miracles actually lead to faith? And this is precisely Dostoevsky's solution. Every time you see this happen, the miracle never proceeds and leads to faith, or never proceeds and leads to being saved. They are saved first. Then we understand the miracles. And oftentimes it is put ironically, precisely to underscore this dual nature and this dual sort of miracle talk. Now, wonderfully, there's so many ways in which Alyosha is a Jesus or Christ-like figure. We've seen this from the Grand Inquisitor speech. We've seen it throughout the entire novel. And this is just so wonderful how the novel ties so many fantastic themes together, because Grushenka has been trying to get Rakitin to lead Alyosha to him all along. And she's promised him, of course, Rakitin is just the selfish kind of guy to do it. And so she promises him 25 rubles to do it. And of course, this is just another way in which Dostoevsky can stitch together this symbolic matrix to Jesus, because that makes Rakitin just like a Judas figure who sells out Jesus and leads to the crucifixion. This is standard New Testament fare. And Rakitin, of course, it is just like Dostoevsky to make this stuff explicit too in many of these metafictional moments. So Rakitin is all ashamed and mad because now Alyosha has the high ground on him. Grushenka lets it drop that actually she was paying Rakitin off to do this thing. And then Rakitin is completely embarrassed about it, but wants to hide his embarrassment. And, he does it by anger, and his anger at Alyosha. And he says, yeah, whatever. You're saying I sold a true friend. You're not even a true friend of mine. And you're not Jesus and I'm not Judas. But that is precisely the symbolism that is invoked, is his Judas-like nature and another way of thinking about him as in league with the devil. Now, let's return to this idea about the chain of salvation that I talked about before with Markel and Zosima, because here we see now that the existential action is finally happening. We've been talking about this novel for 2 weeks, and you've maybe been wondering if this is really worth it. Well, people are starting to get saved, and miracles are rolling. So we've seen Brother Markel be saved, and that relationship to Zosima leads to Zosima's redemption. That relationship to Alexei leads to the crisis, and it was precisely Zosima who says Alyosha needs to go into the world to experience the world of sin, and only through that experience can he come out on the other side. And so we've just seen that very moment, and it's through his bond and memories of Zosima, and we're going to see this in 2 seconds. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is the moment that saves Alexei, and it's precisely what saves Grushenka. It's not just her falling into Dmitri's arms that saves her. It's this moment of mutual acknowledgement between these other two, between her and the other Karamazov brother, which actually leads to her salvation. Now, let me just say, at the end of that section, so you got to go back and look at the book. That chapter starts with when Rakitin meets Alyosha in the dark woods in the pine grove. Then we go through this section, and at the very end of it, before the next chapter, which I'm about to jump to, Rakitin says, when he's mad at him, like, you're not Christ and I'm not Judas, he says, I don't even want to know you anymore. Go be by yourself. There's your road. And he points him on the road. So just think about this sort of symbolically, imagine the scene. He was like going into the dark woods, and now he is going back onto the road. He's emerging from those woods. So he really has gone through the spiritual journey where it's deeply geographical, like the symbolism is really deeply enmeshed here. So finding the road is like the metaphor for being on the path of righteousness now. And the dark woods is thoroughly metaphorical for this this road of temptation, and of course getting lost in the dark woods for ending up in damnation. If you look in the Cana chapter, so this is what happens next. There's actually a reference to roads in here, so that hits that symbolism home even harder. But I don't think I have the quote on these slides for it, but go and check it out. So what is the thing that happens immediately after it? Well, just in case we weren't sure that this is Alyosha's moment of salvation, and this has to do with miracles, the very next chapter is called, Cana in Galilee, where in the New Testament, Jesus performs his first miracle by turning water into wine. So just in case you missed the gravity of what happened, Dostoevsky won't possibly let that happen. Alyosha wanders back to the monastery, and Father Pacey is there over the body of Zosima still, and he's reading a passage from the Bible, which, lo and behold, happens to be about Jesus's miracles, because that's what we've just seen. So now we're going to get like this direct cashing out of the metaphors. And notice this, how Alyosha really has emerged from the dark woods. The odor does not bother him anymore. He is extirpated from his soul the need for simple-minded miracles and supernatural miracles. He has come to a new spiritual place. This is what I was saying, how this really does transform and save him. And he's, of course, really tired. It's been such a long and exhausting day, and he's in this sort of semi-conscious dream state, almost delirium, and it's almost like visionary. And he runs into different characters, like Zosima is there as a character in his dreams, but it's mixed with talk about reality and these memories about the day. But notice this, Zosima says, like, we're drinking new wine. Of course, I'm not reproducing you the passages that Pacey's reading from the Bible, but this is all thoroughly depicting Jesus performing miracles in the New Testament. But what we have here is we have the inversion. We have Dostoevsky's version, where salvation precedes miracles. It's not that miracles precede salvation, which is in a sense what happens in the New Testament version. But Zosima is saying, look, we are drinking new wine. This is about, we have been saved. Miracles have occurred. People are finding salvation. Now, remember, this is how careful Dostoevsky is. What, of course, was Grushenka tempting Alyosha with in her house just previously? It was the old wine. Remember, she offers him champagne. So this event about drinking the new wine here is precisely put in juxtaposition with the old wine that Alyosha turned down. He has gone through the test and is now emerged to the other side. And what Zosima's character says in this dream is, I gave a little onion. That's why I'm here. So he's like, he's in the kingdom of heaven, presumably. And he says, so this onion metaphor, which we haven't talked about thoroughly, but this is one of the most important metaphors in the whole novel, is code here for Zosima's salvation. And he says, and you, quiet one, my meek boy, you too today were able to give an onion to a woman who hungered. So this is the route through which Alyosha gets his salvation. That's his onion that earns him the right to the kingdom of heaven. And then we'll see, now it's like this principle of transmission. Now Grushenka's got the onion, and we're going to see what she can do with it. So besides these direct references to salvation and miracles, Alyosha has these experiences of nature, the mystical experiences that again stitches it precisely to Zosima and Merkel. So Zosima's brother Merkel. So this is so central to the Dostoevsky's main motif in existential story. These feelings of rapture, this mysterious connection to the earth. It is the redemption of the earth, remember. This is paradise now, as long as you can get yourself saved, and then you can understand it. And of course, he falls to the ground. As if he had been cut down, he throws himself to the earth. He's embracing the earth. He doesn't even understand it. He doesn't even try to understand it anymore. He is just having one of these Dostoevsky moments. I don't know about you, but I hope someday I can get myself into one of these Dostoevskian states. This sounds pretty great, but I'm not really sure I've ever had such an experience, but I'm looking forward to it someday, maybe. Now, what are we supposed to think of with this matrix of symbolism? I've said many times that this passage, John 12:24, is essential. to Dostoevsky's existential conception of the human condition. And this precisely, this set of symbols comes up precisely here, because this talk about touching other worlds, remember, we have to think back to that passage which I was emphasizing before about the life of Zosima, where the seeds of the other worlds are what give us the spiritual, the potential to experience the spirit here and be passionate and be spiritual beings on earth. It is those seeds from the other world. And that talk of seeds is precisely the talk of John 12:24, the seeds that fall to the ground in order to bear fruit or save people. So this passage is referenced in the talk of touching other worlds, but then of course that lets us appreciate what did happen to Alyosha. He threw himself to the earth, literally. Of course, this is about John 12:24. It's about the seeds falling to the earth in order to bear fruit. So we see why this symbolism was chosen. It's not just a random happenstance that he goes to the earth and starts, hugging it. He is precisely enacting the metaphor of John 12:24. And what happens, it sort of ends with this monumental line for Alyosha's transformation. I mean, if you didn't realize this was Dostoevsky telling you the character is going through a major transformation, then just read page 363 again. He fell to the earth a weak youth and rose up a fighter. If this were a Rocky movie, then Eye of the Tiger would be playing right now. This is the moment when you would have some amazing soundtrack happening. This is him coming through. This is Dostoevsky really talking deeply about the transformation that he's going through. So this is paying off all the things I've been alluding at and talking about for weeks now, which is Alyosha really is not an angelic character, and he's not a one-dimensional character that you see in the movie. In fact, it's essential to understand that he's not that sort of character to get what Dostoevsky is talking about. Because these themes that we have keep coming up: realism and naturalism versus miracles, science versus religion, asceticism versus wild, passionate indulgence. We can't really understand what Dostoevsky's saying until we see how Alyosha needs to transform. It's precisely his looking for the supernatural miracles, which is the simple-minded faith that he has to outgrow if he is going to truly get saved in Dostoevsky's worldview. So that is why I find Alyosha's transformation so central. Okay, now what this means for a lot of the other characters, and indeed where Alyosha goes from here, that's what we'll talk about in some of the other videos. Thanks.